Now, continuing on the theme we just went through in the last message about the 10 virgins. And now we want to see a clearer picture of that and what's happening. Because as we said before, as we went through the book of Revelation and the church of Laodicea, the church, the end times church, agreed to by everyone, he says that he'll spit them out of his mouth. That doesn't sound like something being raptured. It's spit out. And he said, because you say I'm rich and have become wealthy and have need of nothing, and you do not know that you're wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. This church, the end times church, is spit out of his mouth. They're going into the tribulation to be prepared, to get dressed. They're naked, he said, to get dressed for their wedding. The previous church, the church of Philadelphia, he said, I know your deeds. Behold, I put before you an open door, like John had an open door to heaven, which no one can shut, because you have a little power and have kept my word and have not denied my name, his name. So the church of Laodicea goes into the tribulation to be prepared for the wedding, to be prepared to go to the wedding supper because she's naked. And we read in Revelation 19, 7 and 8, let us rejoice and be glad and give glory to him, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. And it was given to her to clothe herself in fine linen, bright and clean. For the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. This is at the end of the tribulation. This is when you're going to the marriage supper, because verse 9 says, and he said to me, right blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. This is at the end of the tribulation, is the marriage supper of the Lamb. The bride during the tribulation has come out of Egypt, has come out of Babylon. Babylon has fallen, and she's made herself ready. She's dressed in righteousness, ready for her wedding. But just before the tribulation starts, and before the marriage supper, in the Jewish weddings, they had what was the wedding feast, where the groom invited his friends to his father's house as they had supper, and they prepared and waited for the bride to get herself ready. They went to the groom's house. His friends went to the groom's house, his father's house, and they had a wedding feast as they waited for the bride to prepare herself, to get dressed. So we have the marriage supper, when after the tribulation, the bride has made herself ready. But before that, you had the wedding feast. And the groom invited his friends to his father's house to have a feast and wait for the bride to be ready. And that is what you see in the 10 virgins. And we see it here again in Luke chapter 12, starting in verse 35. I didn't used to understand. The bride was naked, and she had to get dressed and prepare herself. And that would happen through the tribulation. But the groom's friends that were invited to the wedding feast, I didn't understand, but they were to be dressed. And we'll bring that subject up later. And they were to be dressed in what? It starts right here in Luke chapter 12, verse 35. Be dressed in readiness and keep your lamps alight. Like the 10 virgins, 5 let their lights go out and weren't ready. When he came in the darkness, he couldn't see them. He always says he's coming as a thief in the night into this dark world, into this darkened life and world we live in. And we have to have our lights, his Spirit glowing in us. Then he sees us. And he takes those that have their lamps lit. And that is to the wedding feast before the tribulation. And how are you ready? He always said he's coming like a thief. Be ready, be on the watch. Don't be drunk, be alert. And so what are we to be dressed in? It's right here in verse 35. Be dressed in readiness. As we're in this world, we're in this dark place, we're slaves in Babylon, as they were in the Old Testament. When he comes and calls those to the wedding feast before the tribulation, before the wedding, before the marriage supper, we are to be dressed in readiness. We are to be waiting, to be watching, not drunk, not loving the world, not loving the things of the world. We're to be waiting for him, separated from this world. And it seems so pitiful. It seems so, what are we doing? But we're waiting. We're waiting for him. When you hear that voice, when you hear that call to get ready, you need to get ready. And you need to be waiting. And you need to stay in that place of readiness. Because as he said in verse 35, be dressed in readiness. That's what the pre-tribulation saints that are going to be raptured, the first fruits, are to be dressed in readiness. And keep your lamps alit. And in verse 36, I didn't used to understand this either. It didn't seem to fit. And he says, and be like men who are waiting for their master when he returns from the wedding feast. And I says, oh, but this is talking about the wedding feast. It doesn't make sense, but it does. What he's saying is, now, you that are waiting before the tribulation, there's no sign, there's nothing, we're just waiting. While they're all enjoying themselves, while most of the saints are out enjoying themselves with the world, we are to be like men who are waiting for their master when he returns from the wedding feast. We have to be like those saints who will get dressed in righteousness during the tribulation and are waiting for him, knowing he's coming, knowing they're in the tribulation, knowing the age is ending. We have to be waiting, dressed in waitingness like they will be nearing the end of the tribulation, at the middle of the tribulation. They will be ready and waiting because they will know exactly what's going on. The tribulation will have been started. The kingdom of the beast will have rose up. The Antichrist will be declaring that he is Christ. They will be ready, and we are to be those saints. If you're going to be caught up in the pre-tribulation rapture, the first fruits rapture, you must be dressed in readiness and waiting as much as they will after the tribulation is already started. And that's why you have a special place with him. There's nothing here making you do it like it will cause the saints to get ready during the tribulation. They will be forced to be ready. We will be ready because we wait for him. We love him. We long for him and his kingdom. And what does it say? So that they may immediately open the door when he comes and knocks. When he comes to you and he calls you, you can't be loving the world. You can't be out drunk. You can't be tied up and loving those things. You won't open the door if you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. But we that are waiting for him before the tribulation must be ready to immediately open the door to him, dressed in readiness. Yes, Lord, we're ready. And he'll take you to the wedding feast before the tribulation. In verse 37, blessed are those slaves whom the master shall find on the alert when he comes. The Christians that are getting saved during the tribulation or go into the tribulation, they're going to be ready. They're going to be on the alert. They're going to be in the tribulation. They're going to be fighting the Antichrist and the kingdom of the beast. They're going to be persecuted. they will be ready. They will be knowing what's going on. They will be preaching the gospel and warning the world about the fall of Babylon and the coming of the Antichrist and the kingdom of the beast. They will be ready. But we are to be ready like that before any of this happens. Like he said, blessed are those slaves whom the master finds on the alert when he comes. Truly I say to you that he, listen here, saints, I couldn't believe this when I had this revelation. He will gird himself to serve. The Lord will gird himself. He will dress himself to serve. And what does it say? And have them recline at table at the wedding feast before the tribulation or at the beginning of the tribulation, and will come up and wait on them. The Lord, for those that are waiting and watching for him, when it's not through the pressure of the tribulation, just out of love, just out of desire, just out of want, they're waiting for him. He will dress himself to serve. And he'll have us recline at the table at the wedding feast. And he will come up and wait on us. What a revelation. It's unbelievable. It's hard to imagine. But that's what he's going to do. In verse 38, whether he comes in the second watch or even in the third, and finds them so, blessed are those slaves. Whatever time he comes into this dark world, when he comes and knocks and calls, and you are ready, you are waiting for him, you are anxious, you ain't saying, oh Lord, but I just took a wife, I got to take care of her, or I just bought some land, I got to take care of it, oh, I got to bury my father. These are the ones that are going to drop everything and willing to go. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life. If you ain't willing to drop all those things he said before, when he would tell somebody to follow him, oh, I got to bury my father. Oh, I bought some land. I got to take care of it. Oh, I started a business. Oh, I'm doing this. You got to be ready to drop everything. Those are the ones that are going. And he will dress himself to serve. He will sit you at table and he will serve you. But he's saying, blessed are you if you're ready in this dark world where it's not obvious and the time isn't obvious. The days of the tribulation are numbered. The saints will know exactly how many days there is and how much time there is from the start of the tribulation to the middle of the tribulation to the end of the tribulation. But us that are waiting for him before the tribulation, we have no idea when he's coming. We have no idea if it's in an hour or 100 years from now. But once he sends this word out, and he has, we must be ready, and we must be on the watch. There's time to tell you over and over, these people went to hell. They're sending everybody to hell. Everybody that ain't ready, everybody that ain't watching, everybody that ain't working, everybody that ain't faithful. All of us have fallen in a million ways. It's talking about the tribulation. If you want to avoid it and be his friends that are invited to a wedding feast at his Father's house before the tribulation, you must be waiting for him. Verse 39, and be sure of this, that if the head of a house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have allowed his house to be broken into. These are the things about the pre-tribulation. We don't know when it's coming. We have to be prepared. He's always warning you to be prepared. If you go into the tribulation, and the saints that are born again in the tribulation, they will be able to number the days. From the day, that hour, it says, that Babylon falls, they will be able to number the days of the tribulation. They're numbered. 3.5 years and 7 years. The middle of the tribulation is exactly 3.5 years when the two witnesses in Israel are caught up. And the church as a whole is raptured then. And then there's 3.5 years left after that God turns back to Israel. And the Jews as a whole turn to him. And the Antichrist persecutes them to no end and wants to wipe them off the earth, because the Antichrist at the middle of the tribulation is going to say that he is the Christ, he is God. He's going to take on a third name that is the same translation of Yeshua, and Yeshua is the name of the Son of the living God. Jesus is a translation of it, a true translation. But the Antichrist is going to take on another translation of it that means he's the Son of the living God. And it will deceive many, but not the elect. And he says in verse 40, you too be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect. The saints that believe that there's a rapture, the rapture is before the tribulation, are right. The saints that believe there's a rapture at the middle of the tribulation are right. And the ones that believe that those at the end of the tribulation are caught up are right. But the beginning of the tribulation is the rapture of those that are not caught by this thief in the night. They're not drunk. They're ready. They're watching on their own. Those will be caught up in the pre-tribulation rapture. Those that are loving the world and carousing and drunkenness and enjoying the things of the world, they'll go into the tribulation. But the Gentiles as a whole will be raptured at the middle of the tribulation with the two witnesses in Israel. And at that point, through that death and resurrection of those two witnesses, Israel will turn to the Messiah in a powerful way. And it will have the latter-day rain and the coming of Elijah poured upon it, and they will reject the Antichrist as he's in the temple and says he's God. And for that reason, the Antichrist will persecute them and try to wipe them off the face of the earth. The church will be gone as the Gentile part of it. Now, Israel will be the church. And the Antichrist will have no purpose but to wipe it out in the short time he has left. Satan will want the Jews gone, and he will do everything to persecute them. But at the end of the tribulation, we will return with him on those white horses, wipe out the Antichrist, the beast. Satan himself will be bound, and those armies that have come against us in him. And we are to be prepared in this dark world for that thief that's coming in the night. We're not to love the world. We're not to love Egypt. We're not to love Babylon. We are to be ready. And it's a hard thing to do, because you truly don't know if it's an hour from now that he'll come like a thief, or it's 100 years from now. But he's coming. And I've heard that voice. If you hear that voice, get ready. Get prepared. And what he says, what you hear whispered in your ear, shout it on the mountaintops, shout it on the housetops. Let your light shine. Let the people know he's coming. But most of them will reject you and reject that word.